Joe Bordeaux, thanks once again for joining us.
Nice to see you again.
Likewise, now franchising. Is
Mhm.
franchising surviving COVID?
Well, that's a good question. And it depends on the concept and it depends on the brand. I will say in July and August, some of the brands I'm working with are beginning to bump up somewhere close to the same months last year in terms of revenues after, huge dips in the second half of March and April. There's a lot of uncertainty still because people are going back to school. And while the COVID numbers are down in much of the United States, they're beginning to creep up again in the Midwest. So it's all very uncertain. Um, but another positive thing that has come out of this is that I've been able to observe a number of brands really taking full advantage of the franchise model. Franchisees are close to their local market areas. They understand the situation at a detailed level. And in a number of cases, they've come up with some very creative solutions and workarounds that they've shared with other franchisees and with their franchisor. And some new products and services have been invented. Some new ways to use digital have been invented. So while it's been a very tough time and continues to be a very tough time, I would say yes, franchising is surviving.
I know many new franchise concepts were starting up early this year, just before COVID happened. What
Mhm.
about now?
I have not heard of anybody who gave up the idea. I'm sure there are some. I have talked with a few folks who have just simply delayed their timeline a bit and just slowed things down, hopefully to get past the uncertain period.
Good to hear that. It's although still very hard though to plan for the future, isn't it? Because we
Absolutely.
we have got no idea what's going to happen around the
Yeah.
corner. Now,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
business owners thinking of franchising their businesses, let's start with what makes a business franchise able.
Well, a number of things. I'll try to boil it down to at least 4 points. I always like to start when people ask me, trying to determine is there really any sort of unique concept or unique branding or something different that causes you to say, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that before. It doesn't have to be a completely new idea. A lot of times it's a combination of several old ideas presented in a new way, but it needs to be somewhat unique and something a little different than what people normally see. Hopefully, the business owner is at a point where they're doing well and they've documented what they're doing. If they're going to be franchisable, they're going to need an operating system that needs to be written down. It needs to be documented. It needs to be replicatable, and this means a number of different things. It needs to work in more than one location if it's a retail business. Certainly, you should not be, best practices would say you should not be beginning franchising unless you try a brick and mortar concept in more than one location, usually at least two or three. But replicatable also means that normal people should be able to do it. If you have the founder of the business who is all in with the business, all excited about it, a perfect match for the business they've created, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you can't find any other people that can do it. The way I like to explain this is that the business needs to be done by average people in an average way. You shouldn't have to find super stars in order to make the concept work. It really does need to be replicatable in various locations or in various cities or in various marketplaces. And you have to be able to find people reasonably who are going to be able to operate the operating system as franchisees. Most important by far, however, is the financial model. Will the financial model, when you model it out, work for average people who are average franchisees? Superstars are always going to, your top 20% are going to do well. Your bottom 20% are going to struggle. But how about the middle? Does the model work for the middle? And that takes into account the business as the founder has set it up, but you got to add in royalties, and you have to really think, once somebody pays you the franchise fee, pays continuing royalties, invests in whatever build out or startup is required for the franchise, is it going to be a good return on investment for that person? Will these units have good unit economics? That's an absolute necessity. So it really comes down to some kind of a unique concept in branding, a documented system, needs to be replicatable, and most importantly, it needs to have good unit economics.
Joe, is there a right way to build a franchise brand? I would imagine we all have ideas, but there's the wrong way and the right way.
Yeah. Well, the good news is there are best practices. Franchising has been around now for decades. And there's a lot of material out there that's been written about it, and there are best practices. Oftentimes, franchise businesses start out with the founder having no idea that they're going to franchise. It starts as a typical standalone business. It's a good idea. Something becomes a success. The business begins to get traction and takes off. And before long, and I just had somebody tell me this same story last week, the founder gets a call from a friend or a member of their family, maybe across town, maybe in another city. Maybe a customer has done business with them and they're all excited about the idea. Or maybe somebody just finds them on the internet. That happens all the time these days. And the founder suddenly says, I've had a person call me or two people call me and they want to license my concept. They're all excited about it. Or else somebody takes a look at what they're doing and just says, you should franchise this business. And maybe the person saying it doesn't even know what they're talking about. But a lot of these businesses start out this way. A big minority of businesses start out where an experienced franchisor or sophisticated investor looks at a local business concept and says, boy, that is franchisable. The most familiar example of that was Ray Kroc and the McDonald brothers, back in the 50s. But that doesn't happen all that often. Usually it's somebody who knows nothing about franchising gets the idea that maybe they should franchise.
Just speaking of McDonald's, before our next question, I've got to tell you that I've actually perfected the Egg McMuffin, and I'm going to franchise the Michael McMuffin, and it's dynamite. Let me tell you, it's smoky cheese and I can't tell you because it's one of those kept secrets.
That's right. Well, that cease and desist letter will be on its way quickly, I'm sure.
Now, how does someone thinking about starting a franchising a business learn the best practice?
Well, it starts with the belief and the realization, and sometimes people have to be convinced of this, that franchising itself, regardless of what business you're in, but franchising itself is now a mature business concept in and of itself. Franchising, as I said, has been around for decades, and there are well-established best practices. So when you make the decision to become a franchisor, regardless of whether you've sold hamburgers or pizza or had a dry cleaning location or two or three, regardless of what business you've been in, when you make the decision to launch a franchise business, you're going into an entirely new business, and that business is the business of franchising. And that is an important concept to get into your head. Because those who don't get it have a lot of trouble. But once you decide to go all in on being a franchisor, then the good news is that there are a lot of resources to help you. But it's important that as a franchisor, you're going to be a trainer. You're going to be a leader, and in a large system, a political leader. You're going to be speaking and leading hundreds and maybe eventually thousands of people in your organization. And that will be a good match for some founders turned franchisors, and it won't be a good match for others.
What are the most common mistakes new franchisors make, though?
Well, it's probably another pretty long list. It starts out by underestimating the amount of capital, the amount of money they're going to need to start. I mean, there are legal requirements in many parts of the world. In the United States, it could be $50,000, $100,000 or more in order to get the legal work done to register and be a franchisor. But beyond that, once you have that answer and that money available, then the trickier part is the infrastructure and the staffing that you're going to need to build in order to adequately support a growing franchise system. And very rapidly, the founder finds out that they can't do it themselves, and they're going to need to build an organization. So it's underestimating the amount of financial investment they're going to have to make to create what, as I've said, is an entirely new business. And that is probably the number one mistake that people make. It's either not realizing they are in a new business or simply not having enough money to be successful.
Sort of reminds me of that movie with Kevin Costner. Remember that? And he built this baseball field, and he heard this whisper that said, "Build it, and they will come."
Exactly.
And I know many people that have gone into business, thought about franchising, and they've built it thinking they will come, but they don't.
Yeah. Well, that leads to the next problem. Once you find out that, revenues and new franchisees are harder to find than I thought, then it is very, very common for new franchisors just to start taking anybody who can possibly smoke a mirror or write a check. And invariably, when you talk to franchisors 5 or 10 years later, their problem, if they've been successful, is dealing with the first few franchisees, many of whom were bad fits and aren't working out. So best practice says you don't sell a franchise, you award a franchise. And new franchisors typically have to sell franchisees on the concept. And that leads to some problems, unfortunately. But if there's adequate capital in the organization, if there's been adequate planning, that kind of thing can be planned for, and sophisticated, experienced franchisors plan for that very problem, so they can start awarding franchises properly from the very beginning.
Now, and I haven't got some nice music, but anyway, are successful franchise brand founders special people?
Yeah, and they are to me at least, primarily because I was never one, and I probably would have been a terrible franchise founder. I've known many, and I am not that kind of person. I was pretty good at operating other people's systems and leading franchise organizations, but there's something special about franchise founders who are really, in many ways, business heroes, or should be, and simply because it's hard to do this, and it requires this ability and patience to be impatiently patient, I guess is a good way to put it. I looked at some numbers last year that were surprising to me. One that stuck out was that only 16% of the world's several thousand franchise brands have over 100 units. And when you think that many times a franchisor really won't break even until they're royalty sufficient, which means their royalties cover their operating expenses and they don't have to depend on selling the next new unit, that's kind of a scary thing. And that basically says that you need to have a good concept, you need to follow best practices, you need to have enough money, and then you need some degree of luck to go along with it. But if you have all those pieces and it all works out, this becomes an incredibly rewarding and life-changing thing to do, being a successful franchisor.
And the first start, I mean, especially now that we're sort of creeping out of COVID, but for how long, we don't know, is to talk to people who have that experience. And I'm talking to one of those now. Joe, tell us about how they could contact yourself or the organisation.
Well, I'm always happy to talk to folks about franchising. We specialize really in working with established franchisors. There are advisors and consultants that will help either startup franchisors or people who are thinking about franchising. You can reach me and us at premierfranchiseadvisors.com. Certainly advise anybody thinking about this to visit the website franchise.org, which is the International Franchise Association, where you will find plenty of resources, and there are many great books on franchising available online as well.
The IFA is one of the great organisations of the world, especially in the business world, and the resources and the knowledge and the support that you can get from an organisation such as this is just, it's invaluable, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a big supporter.
All right. Joe Bordeaux, thank you very much.
Great to see you. Be well and stay safe.
And enjoy your dinner tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.